What I'm about to tell you began with 4 separate incidents that I thought were unconnected, until I realized they were all pieces of the same terrifying puzzle. First, last week, a 400-year-old painting sold at a private auction in Vienna, featuring a nobleman from 1624 who looks exactly like Tom Cruise. Same face, same mysterious smile, as if painted yesterday. But this wasn't the first time. I've tracked down similar paintings across Europe, all featuring the same ageless face, spanning different centuries. Second, 3 months ago at 2:47 a.m., I saw Tom Cruise standing motionless in a Hollywood Hills parking lot, staring directly at me with eyes that seemed to glow in the darkness. According to his publicist, he was filming in Prague that entire week. As I fumbled for my phone to take a picture, he simply vanished. Not walked away, vanished. Third, a former personal assistant who worked with Tom for 3 years contacted me in secret. "He never ate the catered food on set," she whispered nervously, glancing over her shoulder. "He never cast a reflection in the mirrors of his trailer, and during night shoots, he became different. More intense, more powerful, like he was feeding off the energy around him." Fourth, in the forbidden archives of a Romanian monastery, I discovered a prophecy written in 1625 describing the Eternal One, a creature of supernatural beauty who will command the devotion of millions in the age of moving pictures, growing stronger with each soul that gazes upon his image. For months, I thought these were coincidences. Then the pattern became impossible to ignore. What I've uncovered about Tom Cruise will shatter everything you thought you knew about Hollywood's biggest star. Today, I'm revealing the truth that explains his impossible youth, his supernatural abilities, and why he's never aged a single day in 40 years. But I warn you, once you see this evidence, you'll never look at Tom Cruise the same way again. Chapter 1. The painting that changed everything. The art world was buzzing when the painting surfaced at Sotheby's Vienna. Portrait of Count Tommaso di Creusa, dated 1624, attributed to the workshop of Peter Paul Rubens. The auction house described it as depicting a nobleman of extraordinary beauty, captured with an otherworldly quality that seems to transcend the canvas itself. But something was wrong. Terribly wrong. The face staring back from that 400-year-old canvas was unmistakably Tom Cruise. Not similar, not reminiscent, identical. Every line, every angle, every subtle expression, as if someone had painted our modern movie star 4 centuries before his supposed birth. The auction house tried to explain it away as a remarkable historical coincidence and the timeless nature of certain facial structures. But I couldn't let it go, so I started digging. What I found changed everything. In the basement archives of the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, a curator showed me a painting from 1743, a Venetian merchant named Tommaso Cruise. Same face. In the private collection of a London nobleman, I discovered an 1867 photograph of an American railroad tycoon called Thomas Crusoe. Same face. In a dusty Prague museum, a 1923 portrait of a silent film actor credited as Thomas Cruise. Every single image, every single century, the exact same face. "It's impossible," the Uffizi curator whispered as we examined the paintings under UV light. These were created by different artists in different countries, spanning 300 years. But the subject, it's as if time stopped for him. But that wasn't the strangest part. In each painting, in each photograph, there was something in the eyes, something hungry, something that seemed to look directly at you, no matter what angle you viewed it from. The kind of gaze that followed you across a room and lingered in your dreams. The art experts I consulted were baffled. "I've seen Renaissance masters capture eternal beauty," said Dr. Helena Voss, a specialist in historical portraiture. "But this is different. This isn't artistic interpretation, this is documentation, as if the same person sat for each artist across centuries. Then came the discovery that made my blood run cold. In each location where these portraits were found, local records showed the same pattern. The mysterious subject would arrive suddenly, become a patron of the arts for exactly 7 years, then vanish without a trace. Always 7 years, always the same cycle, and always, in their wake, stories of strange happenings, artists who aged rapidly after painting him, models who became obsessed with capturing his likeness, wealthy collectors who wasted away while staring at his portraits. But here's what terrified me most. I calculated
What had changed? What was different about this cycle? The answer would come from the most unexpected source. Chapter 2. The Midnight Encounter. I was driving home from researching the paintings when it happened. Mulholland Drive at 2:47 a.m., a stretch of road that's claimed more lives than any other in Los Angeles. The fog was thick that night, rolling in from the ocean like a living thing. My headlights caught something in the mist ahead, a figure standing in the middle of the road, perfectly still. I slammed on the brakes, heart pounding, expecting to see someone injured or in distress. But as the fog cleared, I realized who I was looking at. Tom Cruise stood there in a long black coat, his face pale in the headlights, eyes reflecting the light like an animal's. He wasn't moving, wasn't breathing, just watching me. I sat frozen behind the wheel, unable to process what I was seeing. According to every entertainment news source, Tom was filming Mission Impossible 8 in Prague that entire week. The production had been heavily covered, set photos, interviews, the works. He was supposed to be 6,000 miles away, but there he was, standing in the middle of a deserted Hollywood road at nearly 3 a.m., looking exactly as he had in Top Gun nearly 40 years ago. I reached for my phone, hands shaking. I needed proof. I needed evidence. But the moment the camera app opened, he tilted his head slightly, a movement so subtle it could have been my imagination. Then he smiled. It wasn't the famous Tom Cruise smile from the red carpets and talk shows. This was something else entirely, something cold and knowing and infinitely patient. A smile that suggested he was enjoying a private joke at my expense. I blinked, and he was gone. Not walked away, not ducked behind a car. Gone, vanished, as if he'd never been there at all. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it. A trick of the fog, a hallucination brought on by too much research and too little sleep. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Tom Cruise, or whatever was wearing his face, had been waiting for me, that our encounter wasn't random, that he'd wanted me to see him. The next morning, I called every contact I had in the entertainment industry, trying to verify Tom's whereabouts. The Prague production confirmed he'd been on set all week. Hotel records, security footage, witnesses. Tom Cruise had definitely been in Eastern Europe when I saw him in Hollywood. So what had I encountered on Mulholland Drive? And why did I have the unsettling feeling that it had been watching me ever since? The answer came 3 weeks later in the form of a terrified phone call from someone who'd worked closer to Tom than almost anyone else. Chapter 3. The Assistant's Confession. Her name was Sarah Chen, and she'd worked as Tom Cruise's personal assistant from 2019 to 2022. When she reached out to me through an encrypted messaging app, she was living under an assumed name in a small town in Oregon, too scared to return to Los Angeles. "I can't stay silent anymore," she said during our video call, her face hidden in shadows. "People need to know what he really is." Sarah's story began normally enough. She'd been hired through a talent agency, underwent extensive background checks, signed NDAs that would bankrupt her if violated. Standard procedure for a celebrity of Tom's caliber. But within weeks, she noticed things that didn't add up. "He never ate," she told me, her voice barely above a whisper. "In 3 years, I never saw him consume a single piece of food. I'd order meals for meetings, and his plate would remain untouched. When people asked, he'd claim he'd eaten earlier or was fasting for a role. But I saw his schedule. There was no earlier. There was no time when he ate. She paused, gathering courage before continuing. The mirrors were worse. His trailer, his offices, his homes, they all had mirrors. Dozens of them. But when you looked at them while he was in the room, his reflection was wrong, faded, like he was only partially there. I thought maybe it was the lighting or special glass, but it happened everywhere. Sarah's hands trembled as she described night shoots, which Tom seemed to prefer despite the industry standard of day filming. During night shoots, he was different, more focused, more intense, but also more alive. It was like he drew energy from the darkness. The crew would be exhausted after 16-hour days, but Tom would be more energetic at 4 a.m. than he'd been at noon. And the way people looked at him during those night shoots, it was like they were hypnotized. But the incident that made her quit happened during the filming of a particularly demanding action sequence. It was 3 a.m., and Tom was hanging from a helicopter 2,000 feet above downtown L.A. No stunt double, no safety nets beyond the basic harness. The entire crew was holding their breath, watching him perform this impossible stunt. But here's what nobody talks about. During the breaks, when they'd bring the helicopter down for equipment adjustments, Tom wasn't tired. He wasn't even breathing hard. After an hour of defying death in freezing wind, he looked refreshed. Sarah leaned closer to the camera, her eyes wide with remembered terror. That's when I saw it. When they were adjusting his harness, I was close enough to check his pulse, standard safety protocol. But when I put my fingers to his neck, she stopped, unable to continue for several moments.
Sarah quit the next day, claiming a family emergency. She'd been in hiding ever since, too terrified to speak publicly until now. I signed NDAs, but some things are more important than money, she concluded. People have a right to know what's really running Hollywood, what's been controlling the entertainment industry for decades. After our interview, I tried to verify Sarah's claims through other industry sources. Most refused to talk, but the few who did share similar stories. Caterers who noticed untouched food, makeup artists who struggled with unusual skin properties, stunt coordinators who couldn't explain Tom's impossible physical capabilities. The pattern was clear, but I needed more evidence, more pieces to complete this impossible puzzle. That's when I remembered the prophecy. Chapter 4. The Ancient Prophecy. The monastery of St. Dracul sits high in the Carpathian Mountains of Romania, its ancient stones holding secrets that most of the world has forgotten. When I contacted Brother Mikhail about viewing their historical archives, he initially refused. "Some knowledge is too dangerous for the modern world," he wrote in his reply. "The texts you seek speak of things that should remain buried." But after weeks of correspondence and proving my academic credentials, he agreed to a single visit. Under no circumstances was I to photograph or copy any materials. I could observe and take notes, nothing more. The manuscript was older than I'd expected. Written in a mixture of Latin and ancient Romanian, the text was titled Prophetia Aeternorum, the prophecy of the eternal ones. Brother Mikhail translated the relevant passages, his voice growing more troubled with each line. "In the age of moving pictures, when images dance upon walls and reach into every home, the Eternal One shall rise to his greatest power. He shall take the form of divine beauty, and millions shall worship his image without knowing what they serve. Through their devotion he shall feed, through their dreams he shall grow stronger." The prophecy described specific signs that would herald this rise. He shall perform feats that defy mortal limitation, yet mortals shall explain them as mere skill. He shall remain unchanged as decades pass, yet mortals shall praise his preservation. He shall command loyalty from those who never meet him, for his image alone shall be enough to entrance their souls. But it was the next passage that made my blood run cold. In the seventh cycle of his dominion, when his power reaches its peak, the veil between his true nature and his mortal disguise shall thin. Those with eyes to see shall witness his reality, and in that witnessing they shall face a choice. Serve him willingly, or be consumed by the truth they cannot bear to know. Brother Mikhail closed the manuscript, his face grave. This prophecy has been in our archives for 400 years. Our order was founded to watch for these signs, to record their fulfillment. I asked him why he'd shared this with me. His answer still haunts me, because the prophecy speaks of a time when the truth must be revealed, when someone from the outside would come seeking answers. That seeker would be given the knowledge necessary to make their choice. He fixed me with intense eyes. You are not here by accident. This moment was foretold. As I left the monastery, Brother Mikhail handed me a small silver pendant, an ancient symbol I didn't recognize. Wear this, he instructed. It will help you see clearly when the time comes. And remember, some truths come with a price. Make sure you're prepared to pay it. The pendant grew cold against my chest as I drove away, and I couldn't.
Chapter 5. The pattern emerges. Back in Los Angeles, I spread everything out across my apartment floor like a detective mapping a serial killer's activities. Paintings spanning 400 years, witness testimonies from dozens of film sets, historical records showing the same 7-year cycles across centuries, medical reports that didn't make sense, the ancient prophecy that seemed to predict our modern entertainment industry, and at the center of it all, Tom Cruise, unchanged and unchanging, more powerful now than he'd ever been. But I needed to understand the mechanism. How was this possible? What was the source of his power? The answer came from an unexpected source: social media analytics. I partnered with a data analyst who specialized in celebrity influence metrics. What we discovered was unprecedented. Tom Cruise's global reach wasn't just massive, it was otherworldly. His films had been viewed by an estimated 4.2 billion people worldwide. His social media presence, while smaller than some stars, had an engagement rate that defied explanation. I've never seen anything like it, the analyst told me. Normal celebrity engagement follows predictable patterns, but Tom's metrics suggest something else entirely. It's like people aren't just watching his content, they're being drained by it. Look at the data. She showed me charts that made no sense. Whenever Tom released new content or appeared at major events, there were corresponding spikes in reported fatigue, depression, and unexplained exhaustion in the cities where his appearances were broadcast live. It's subtle, she explained. Individually, these cases would never be connected, but when you map them against Tom's public activities, the correlation is undeniable. It's as if he's somehow drawing energy from his audience. But the most disturbing discovery came when we analyzed the longevity of his career compared to his contemporaries. Actors who'd started their careers around the same time as Tom had either retired, died, or faded into obscurity. Even those still working showed normal signs of aging and career decline. Tom alone remained at his peak. It's not just unusual, the analyst concluded. It's impossible. No human being maintains this level of physical capability, mental acuity, and career dominance for 4 decades. Something else is sustaining him. The evidence was overwhelming, but I still needed the final piece. I needed to understand what Tom Cruise really was. That night I had a dream that felt more like a memory. I was back on Mulholland Drive, but this time I didn't stop the car. I followed the figure in black as it glided through the fog, leading me deeper into the Hollywood Hills.
In the dream, I found myself in an underground chamber beneath the Hollywood sign, where dozens of people sat in rows of ornate chairs, all staring at a massive screen showing Tom Cruise films on endless loop. Their faces were blank,
their eyes unfocused, and with each scene they seemed to grow a little paler, a little more drained. At the front of the chamber sat Tom himself, but he was different. His skin was marble white, his eyes glowed with an inner fire, and when he smiled, I saw fangs, sharp, predatory, ancient. He turned to look at me, and when he spoke, his voice echoed from everywhere at once. "Do you understand now? They give me their dreams, their hopes, their very life force, and in return, I give them stories that make them feel alive. It's the perfect symbiosis. They worship me, and I sustain myself on their worship." I woke up in a cold sweat, the silver pendant burning against my chest.
Chapter 6. The Impossible Truth. The pieces were all there. I just had to accept what they were telling me. Tom Cruise wasn't human. He never had been. The paintings, the testimonies, the prophecy, the data, they all pointed to the same impossible conclusion. For 400 years, a creature of supernatural origin had been moving through human history, adopting new identities every few decades, growing stronger with each incarnation. But what was he exactly? I returned to the historical records, this time looking for patterns I'd missed. In every location where the Tom Cruise figure had appeared, there were consistent reports. Mysterious disappearances of young, creative individuals, unexplained illnesses affecting artists and performers, stories of people who became obsessed with capturing his likeness, only to waste away from an unidentifiable ailment. The European folklore was even more specific. Legends of beautiful entities that fed on human creativity, dreams, and life force. Creatures that could appear human, but cast faint reflections and needed constant sustenance from mortal admirers. In Romania, they called them Nosferatu. In Hungary, vampire. In England, they were known simply as the undead. Vampires, but not the crude monsters of horror films. Something far more sophisticated, something that had evolved beyond the need for blood, learning instead to feed on something more sustainable and renewable: human devotion. The entertainment industry was the perfect hunting ground. Movies allowed him to entrance millions simultaneously. Each viewer who watched his films unknowingly offered a piece of their life force. Every fan who admired his ageless beauty fed his supernatural existence. The math was staggering. With 4.2 billion people having watched his films, even if each person gave only a tiny fraction of their energy, the cumulative effect would be enough to sustain him indefinitely. But the prophecy had mentioned a price. What was it? I found my answer in the monastery's final text, the passage Brother Mikhail had hesitated to translate. When the Eternal One's deception is revealed, he must choose. Return to the shadows and begin anew in another form, or reveal his true nature and claim dominion over those who know his secret. But beware, for if he chooses dominion, those who revealed him shall be first to join his eternal court. The pendant around my neck was burning now, and I understood its purpose. It wasn't protection, it was a tracking device. Brother Mikhail hadn't been trying to help me. He'd been marking me for the entity I'd been investigating. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Mulholland Drive, midnight. Come alone. As I read the message, I realized the truth of my situation. I hadn't been investigating Tom Cruise. I'd been auditioning for him. Everything. The paintings, the assistant's testimony, even the prophecy. I was about to come face to face with a creature that had been perfecting the art of deception for 4 centuries. A being that had convinced the world to worship him while feeding on their dreams. A vampire who had traded blood for something far more precious: human souls. The question was no longer what Tom Cruise was. The question was whether I would live long enough to tell anyone.
Chapter 7. The Final Revelation. I arrived at Mulholland Drive 5 minutes before midnight, the silver pendant now burning against my skin like a brand. The fog was thicker than it had been during my first encounter, rolling across the road in waves that seemed almost alive. This time I didn't stop when I saw the figure in black. I parked and walked toward him, each step feeling like I was moving through water. The air itself seemed heavy, pregnant with an otherworldly energy that made my skin crawl and my pulse race. Tom Cruise stood exactly where I'd first seen him, but he was no longer bothering to maintain his human facade. His skin was alabaster white, almost luminescent in the moonlight. His eyes glowed with an inner fire that had nothing to do with reflected light, and when he smiled at my approach, I saw them clearly for the first time. Fangs, ancient, sharp, and beautiful in their terrible perfection. "You've done well," he said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. "Better than most who've attempted to uncover my nature. The paintings were a nice touch. I was wondering when someone would finally connect those dots." I found my voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. "How long have you been watching me?" "Since you first looked at that painting in Vienna. Did you really think its appearance at auction was coincidence?" His laugh was like silver bells and breaking glass. "I've been curating my own mystery for decades, leaving breadcrumbs for someone clever enough to follow them. You passed every test." "Tests?" "The assistant who contacted you, one of mine, instructed to share just enough truth to intrigue you further. The monastery brother, a faithful servant who's been guarding those texts for me since I wrote them in 1625. Even your data analyst. She's been feeding you exactly the information I wanted you to have." The reality of my situation crashed over me like ice water. "You orchestrated everything." "Of course. Do you really think a creature who survived for 400 years would leave evidence of his existence to chance?" He began walking in a slow circle around me, and I noticed that his feet made no sound on the asphalt. "I've been searching for someone with the intelligence to see the truth and the courage to pursue it despite the danger. Someone worthy of joining my eternal court." "Your court." "Every vampire of my age needs devoted servants. Humans who know our true nature and choose to serve willingly, rather than mindless cattle who stumble through life unaware. The arrangement is quite beneficial. They gain immortality, purpose, and a place in history. I gain loyal assistants who can move through human society without raising suspicion." He stopped directly in front of me, close enough that I could smell the ancient power radiating from his being. Old parchment, incense, and something metallic that might have been blood.
"But why reveal yourself now? Why risk exposure after centuries of secrecy?" His smile grew wider, revealing more of those impossible fangs. "Because times are changing. The old ways of hiding are becoming obsolete. Soon it will be impossible to maintain the charade. Cameras everywhere, DNA analysis, digital tracking. The modern world is making secrecy untenable." "So you're planning to come out of the shadows?" "I'm planning to take control openly. No more hiding, no more pretending to be human. With the global reach I've built through Hollywood, I can command the devotion of billions. Imagine it, an entire world that willingly offers their energy to sustain me. No more need for deception or elaborate schemes." The prophecy's final warning echoed in my mind. If he chooses dominion, those who revealed him shall be first to join his eternal court. And if I refuse? His expression didn't change, but the temperature around us dropped 20 degrees. "Then you join my court unwillingly. Either way, you've seen too much to return to your ordinary life. The only question is whether you serve me as a willing ally or a mindless thrall." I thought about everything I'd learned, everything I'd witnessed. The centuries of manipulation, the millions of people unknowingly feeding this creature their life force, the dark future he was describing. What do you really want from humanity? What I've always wanted: sustenance, entertainment, worship. His eyes glowed brighter.
I am what humans have always needed, a God worth worshipping. Unlike the distant deities of old religions, I give my followers exactly what they crave: stories that make them feel alive, adventures that fill their mundane existence with meaning, a perfect idol to admire and aspire to become. You're a parasite. I'm a symbiont. They get the dreams I provide through my films, and I get the energy I need to continue providing those dreams. It's a perfect system that could sustain itself forever. The pendant against my chest was now so hot it was burning my skin. I reached up and tore it away, and immediately my vision cleared. The fog around us dissipated, and I could see we weren't alone. Dozens of figures stood in the shadows around us, pale, beautiful beings with glowing eyes and predatory smiles. His court, his children, other vampires he'd created over the centuries. "Welcome," Tom said, spreading his arms wide, "to the future of humanity. The age of open vampire dominion begins tonight, and you, my dear investigator, have the honor of being among the first to witness it." As his children began to close in around me, their fangs gleaming in the moonlight, I realized that my investigation into Tom Cruise's impossible youth had led me to a truth far more terrifying than I'd ever imagined. Hollywood's biggest star wasn't just a vampire. He was the vampire king, and I was going to have a front row seat to the end of the world as we knew it.